It's time to start running!
Hi guys, this is Benjamin Barker here from 2+2, otherwise known as Dan. I'm here with Sean, my partner coach, and one of our students, Mark. Mark recorded about 45 minutes of live action play, playing on Raisin Fold Poker, part of the Everleaf Network. And Sean and I are here to do a little Leakfinder with him. We're just going to go through the video, talk about some of the spots he gets into, and hopefully help him find a couple leaks in his game and get a little bit stronger on a few concepts. So, Sean, say hi.
Hey guys.
And Mark, say hi as well.
Hey guys. Hey guys, what's up?
So we're all here, and the point of this video is to kind of demonstrate, how we would go about helping a student during a sweat. So we're all here. Without further ado, let's get the footage rolling.
All right. So I guess these are all 50 NL tables, Mark.
Yes.
Okay. Like what each number represents. So the first one's VPIP, second one's PFR, the next one is...
Yeah. It's set up, I haven't changed the thing, so it's steal.
Okay.
And then 3-bet.
Okay. And then on the line 2, what's the first number?
Aggression factor.
Okay.
Continuation bet.
Mm-hmm.
Probably fold to C-bet.
Yeah. And then do you know what the last one is there?
Actually, I do not.
Okay.
I don't know either offhand.
I think just in general, when you're this HUD is actually pretty manageable, but and I'll pause it before we do anything on this hand. This HUD's pretty manageable, but I come across and I don't know if you have the same, Dan. I come across students that have HUDs with like 8 lines and like 20 stats, and you have and then I'll ask them, okay, what's this stat, and they have no idea. And I'm like, okay, where's 3-bet? And they can't even find 3-bet on their own HUD because they put so many stats on it. And this one, like I said, 2 lines, pretty manageable. But pretty good word of advice is if you don't know what the stats are in your HUD, you have too many.
I just the last one is went to showdown.
Gotcha.
Okay. Oh, okay.
All right.
So fold to 3-bet is not on here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I'd probably recommend adding that just as a side note. I just put it right after the 3-bet stat. Yeah. Fold to 3-bet's a handy one. And just one last question before we go on. Is there anything that we should know about any history you have with any of these regs? I see one of the guys, I can't make out his name, the Antoine Dodson avatar guy has 2.4K hands with him, and then you got like 1K hands with this guy. Is there any sort of like dynamic or like anything about these guys that you kind of know offhand before we dive in?
I think this guy Jungle Man with the Antoine Dodson avatar is about I would say him and I are pretty even players and play the same style.
Okay.
So he's a pretty decent regular, but
yeah.
Okay. All right, and then I guess we don't have a ton of reads on anyone else. 100 hands here. This guy we have 1K hands on, probably 2317. This weird looking Darth Maul avatar or whatever. So he probably looks like a pretty good reg. But all right, well I guess we'll start with this first hand. Jack's on the button. We're getting 3-bet by a guy who looks like he's 35-24. We only have 105 hands on him. 2.9% 3-bet over that sample. What do you generally do here? Like when you're on the button facing a 3-bet from a guy that looks relatively aggressive, but over the sample hasn't been 3-betting a ton. Like what is your standard here, Mark?
I think I would call.
Okay. Would you ever 4-bet? Do you ever 4-bet jacks in this spot?
I may have. I can't remember what I did. I might have 4-bet.
I mean, like in general, like
absolutely. If someone has a high 3-bet percentage.
Yeah. Okay. I'd say that in this spot, probably like your standard should probably just be 4-bet and then call it off with jacks. Like unless the guy is looking relatively nitty, or you have him with a low 3-bet over a large sample. But this guy's 35-24, and his 3-bet number just isn't going to have come in. Like it's not even going to be relevant after 100 hands so far. So I would go more off this 35-24 and assume that he's 3-betting pretty often, and that 4-betting and calling jacks when it's blind versus button here is going to be really profitable.
Yeah, I'd say for me, if someone's 3-bet is like, if it's like 4% or less in general, I'm probably just not going to want to get in jacks there. Mm-hmm. And if that's assuming it's a big sample, or if I don't have much of a sample, if they're like, playing a VPIP of like under 20, if they're playing like an 18-16 style, I might not want to get in jacks either. So just as sort of a general guideline about who I want to get jacks in or not. So here, I think with the info we have, I mean, like Sean said, he does look pretty aggro. He hasn't 3-bet much, so it's kind of hard to say. I think 4-bet call is fine. I think calling with the jacks here is fine too, because we don't know a ton about him either way.
Yeah, definitely calling with jacks is not. It's not the worst option. Folding is obviously the worst option, but I think 4-betting is just going to be a little bit better. All right, so we get kind of a grody looking flop here. What's your plan on this board, Mark? When if he see, I guess we can kind of see what he does first, but do you have any kind of ideas of what to do? Like once he checks, what's your
I'm
plan?
I'm betting.
And if he check raises, what are you gonna do?
Call.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a pretty good flop for jacks. I mean, we flopped an overpair. We have a gut shot. He could just have a lot of random overcards. He could have some flush draws, things of that nature. If he bet this flop, I'd be pretty, against some guys I'd jam it, and against some guys I'd just call if he had bet. I think there's merit to both if he had actually bet out. Once he checks, I'm definitely betting this flop.
With if he had aces, kings, queens, I don't think he would be checking this flop.
In general, you're right. I mean, you will find some guys that are going to check raise. Some regs will check this board with aces or kings because they know that you're going to bet your entire range when they check you on a board like this drawy. And so they'll check it just to check shove on you, and then and hope that you kind of stack off with jacks or a 10 or something. And also just to kind of in the action, so they don't have to play out of position on this board for multiple streets. So it's not something that it's a little less common than them just c-betting the aces or kings, but you will see regs do it from time to time to check raise all in here with aces and kings. But they'll also do it with draws, like ace king, ace queen of clubs type of hand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we do decide to bet, and looks like we go on the big side. We bet $8 here. What was your thinking behind the $8? Why'd you bet that particular size?
Because there's a lot of draws out there.
And if you had a draw, do you think he would have checked it to you on the flop? Like if he had 8-9, do you think he checks it on the flop? Or do you think he would just go ahead and bet it?
I think he probably bets 8-9. If he has 2 clubs, he may check it.
So you think he might check?
I kind of like a big bet, Sean.
Yeah.
The reason I like kind of a big bet is I think if he's check folding, he's just check folding, and if he's check something else, he's already made up his mind that that's what he's going to do. So I don't think if we bet 650, we're going to get wider check calls than we do if we bet 8. If he already decided he's going to check call, I think he's just doing it.
And I remember thinking by him 3-betting and then checking the flop, I'm thinking ace king, ace queen, something like that.
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of what I'm getting at, and I guess I don't hate the bet size, but what I'm kind of getting at is that if he's checking, Mark, if you're putting him on ace king or ace queen, if you think that's his most likely hand, I mean, there's no betting this size doesn't help us versus ace king or ace queen. We don't get action from that no matter what size we bet. So like we have to think about the types of hands that are going to call us. Like when he checks, if he's checking a hand here, it's likely to be a hand that contains an 8 or 7, maybe a weak 10 that he decided to 3-bet as bluff, maybe like a Jack 10, Ace 10 offsuit type of hand, and maybe he's deciding to check it and play a little bit of pot control. But like when he has a hand like Ace Queen or Ace King, that doesn't really matter because he's always check folding that. So when you're choosing a size here, you kind of have to think about the types of hands you're expecting him to call you with. And like what size they'll call. And I think Dan's kind of right here. Like if he has Ace 10 here, he's check calling no matter what size we bet. But the fact that it's a drawy board probably isn't the reason to bet so large, because I don't think he checks a draw here.
Unless he's going to check jam it.
Right. In which case he's doing that over a $6 bet as well.
Right. So your size was fine, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what we said, but yeah, I guess the reason behind the size is important. Looks like on table 2, were we the pre-flop raiser here?
Yeah, the fish limped in the small blind. How much is his stack size? I can't make it out on my screen.
It looks like
72.
Yeah, it looks like $72. It's a little tough, and let me apologize to the guys watching the video for the quality. When we rendered this, we kind of maybe made the quality a little bit too low, so some of this stuff might be tough to see, but hopefully you can make it all out. But anyway, yeah, he's got a $72 stack size. Mark, I definitely think you should have c-bet here. This board's very dry. There's not a whole lot of hands that can call you. Like he's going to check fold a lot of hands that. Yeah, when he's not going to check fold like ace highs all that often, but he will check fold hands with equity, and he'll also check fold hands like, let's just say he has a hand like Queen 9. If we check back on the flop, he's just going to bet the turn, and we're going to lose to that hand because we have to fold the turn. Like we can't really call down with King High. So even taking him off of hands that we beat is good because we lose to those hands if we check, or we lose to them most of the time if we check. So I think you definitely have to c-bet, and it doesn't have to be like here, like it's a $4 pot, so we can just bet $250, and we're going to take it down. That's going to be profitable on its own.
Yeah. Plus, you get the reason I asked about stack size is because he's full stacked. You can like potentially like barrel him off, even though he's a fish. You can barrel him off like 5x, 4x, pocket deuces. Crap like that. You get to bluff at like aces on the turn and jacks on the turn, and obviously kings and queens are good for you.
Yeah, let's talk about like when the board comes 10 high and you have like king queen there. You can barrel on a 9, a jack, a queen, a king, or an ace, right? And you can bet on all those. Like all of those cards give you equity. So they make it really, really easy to barrel and be profitable with the barrel. And you see what happened
Plus,
there.
Plus, they're very scary to his check calling range.
Right, exactly. And then you see what happened there, Mark, is we checked back the flop, he led the turn, and we folded. And, he may have had the best hand, he may have had a pair that wasn't going to fold anyway, but he's certainly in his range there for leading the turn is a lot of hands that would have folded the flop.
I would fold ace-9 offsuit under the gun.
Yeah, I agree.
I definitely, I don't open that hand there. I think, like, it just plays really ace-9 offsuit, ace-8 offsuit, ace-7 offsuit. Those kind of hands are like pretty junky hands.
Yep.
They really play pretty badly post-flop. You just like there's not a lot going for them. You end up with a lot of like, marginal pairs that you're not sure where you're at, and like they don't have good chances to improve really. So
think about it this way. Like let's say the flop comes 9 high. Like do you want a lot of money to go in when the flop comes 9 high? And conversely, like if it comes ace high, do we want a lot of money to go in on an ace high flop when we have ace 9? And I think in either case, we're usually not going to want a really big pot. But whereas if you have a hand like ace queen, when it comes queen high, you're pretty happy with a sizable pot, as well as on an ace high board with ace queen. Does that make sense? So when you're playing ace 9,
I play like a 27-23 style, so I'm pretty loose pre-flop, but I even fold ace-9 offsuit in middle position as well, and the cutoff is where I would kind of start opening it by default. Incidentally, I probably would have played that ace-9 a little differently post-flop, but I don't think we want to go crazy on talking about like literally every single hand, or else we'll never get through anything.
And we're known for taking a long time to talk about stuff, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked briefly about this queen jack offsuit, just this kind of spot in general. When someone limps the, like a kind of fishy guy limps the button, what type of hands to raise here out of position? Let me first ask Mark, what types of hands you generally would raise here when a fishy guy limps the button and you're in one of the blinds? What's your standard raising range here?
Pairs 7 and higher. Ace 10, ace jack, ace queen, king queen. That's probably it.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I think there's some cases to even just complete or check with a hand as strong as ace 10 or pocket sevens against certain villains. But I think that's pretty reasonable. Would you agree, Dan? Like, for the most part, you don't want to be raising hands like 5-6 suited out of position versus guys that limp the button, unless they're folding to tons of c bets.
I would probably always raise ace 10, but in general, like, my rule of thumb there is I'm trying to raise big cards.
Yeah.
If I have 2 big cards in my hand, I'm raising. And I'm never raising like small pocket pairs or small or medium suited connectors. The reason being that those hands rely on semi-bluffing opportunities, in order to show a profit in those kind of spots. And versus a guy that doesn't like to fold, you're not semi-bluffing. You're just like sticking money in the pot with the worst hand for no reason.
Yeah.
So I just like to raise big card hands, and then if I flop a pair, I can just like value bet the guy to death.
Yeah, and I think it's reasonable when when you're faced with a guy who has position on you and doesn't fold. You don't want to take 7 high to battle with him. You want hands that can flop top pair, and 6-7 rarely flops top pair. Oh, and he had a.
And it looks like you bet the flop with top pair, and now we're betting the turn.
Yeah, which is fine. And the guy has like less than a min raise and ships it in, and we own.
Yeah.
Well played. Had he had a normal stack size, you could queen jack is probably reasonable to raise there out of position pre-flop, but I think it's also okay to complete.
What happened with that ace 9?
What table was it, Dan?
The table 3, lower left.
Let me back it up. Let's get the pre-flop. It looks like we'll catch up. It's kind of hard to be precise here with my rewinding. Yeah, it looks like we're going to call a raise out of position with it, and I'm glad you caught that if that's the case. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the jungle man raises.
No, it's the cutoff, but it almost doesn't matter who raises. This hand, again, just like we'd folded under the gun, this hand's really, really junky. I wouldn't even be fighting ace 10 offsuit here. Ace jack offsuit I'd probably be squeezing most of the time, but ace 9 certainly not going to flat here. Even suited, I'd just be folding it most of the time.
Yeah, Mark, this is pretty spewy pre-flop.
Yeah, it's going to get you into a ton of trouble.
Calling too light out of the blinds is a leak that a lot of players have. Ace 9 offsuit is a fine hand to 3-bet as a bluff, and it's also a fine hand to fold, but it's not a good hand to call with. And in fact, I don't really like calling with like any ace. Like, big aces are fine, but like any sort of ace X, even like ace deuce, ace 3, like although any of them are just bad to like flat call heads up out of position. They just don't play very well post flop. I'd much rather have king jack than ace 9, because king jack it can make straights, like there's a block, it can connect harder to boards. Ace 9 is just you're just basically hoping you flop an ace and that it's good and that you somehow get paid.
You're hoping that there's an ace on board, and you're hoping that only maybe 1.5 streets of money go in.
So yeah, that's definitely, take that right out of your like defending range there. Don't be flat calling with that kind of junk out of position. It's best to just call real tight out of position.
Looks like we raised ace-10 on the bottom right. Raised ace-10, we go four-handed to the flop, and we flop a nuts flush draw, just in case either of you missed that.
No. Yeah.
So,
I would see bet for sure.
yeah, I think $4 is fine. It looks like you almost bet $3, and I think $4 is slightly better. Maybe $4.50, maybe even $5 would be fine as well. But yeah, anywhere in that range is fine. I think I probably call that river, but it's fine to fold it, I guess. On table
No way,
one.
man.
What?
You can't fold that. I would not fold that ever.
Yeah,
I just
mean it didn't seem like it was such a huge spot that it didn't seem worth pausing the video, I guess.
I would have value bet the river. I'm not joking.
What, with the ace-4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the hand? Okay.
I think when it goes chuck, 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 you got the best handle a lot of time on the river. So I would probably just have bet it small myself to try to get called by, like, ace or king high.
Okay, and I remember this hand here with the aces. This is a very interesting hand.
Okay. Yeah, there's a couple things. It looks like he opens to $2 4x, and we go ahead and 3-bet to $8, which is 4 times the size of his open. I think a lot of people would be scared to 3-bet this large, and they would just go with like $6 because they feel like they're going to get too many folds. But if you're paying attention, this guy's 56-20. 56-19, so yeah, definitely we should go at least this size, maybe even larger.
What's the stack size though?
It's hard to tell. It looks like he's gonna have I think it's 27, but it could be 37. It's really grainy.
Looks. Yeah, I can't make it out, but I thought it was like 30.
I
39
agree with
or
Sean about making the big 3-bet against Superfish, but if he's only got a half stack, I might go just a touch smaller. Simply just because of the fact that he's half stacked and it'll be so easy to get the money in post flop.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the point is, don't be afraid. Like when the guy's 56 VPIP, he's not gonna fold. So don't be afraid to make it big.
Doing the normal. That's what I figured he wasn't gonna fold.
Yeah. All right. So point being that we've got. I mean, he's got like either $21 or $31 left. It's pretty tough to see here, and the pot's $17, and it just honestly, it's almost irrelevant how we play post flop now because we're basically already all in. Like when he donks here, you could raise it, you could flat, you could make a small raise, you could just shove it. I think they're all reasonable.
Yeah, I would definitely make a small raise though, just because I want to get value from his draws.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want him to bet a small draw and then check a turn blank with king jack. If he's got king jack or any clubs, any straight draw, just random, even a 9, he'll call a small raise with all that. So I wouldn't make it huge, but I'd probably bump it to maybe $10.
Let's see what happens. Yeah, and I think we definitely need to raise on the turn. When he makes this really small bet again, I think we need to just, depending again because it's so hard to see a stack size, but probably I would just ship it in on the turn. If I had called the flop and he bets small on the turn, I would just jam it in.
Sean, just to keep an eye on the time, we need to back up to around the 8-minute mark to talk about the hand that went down on table 2 once we're done with the aces.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, the main reason for raising on the flop or the turn is because he can't call the river with a whiffed draw.
Right.
So we just want to get value from his flush draws and straight draws and stuff before, the river bricks out and he misses, because he'll call it off with those crappy draw hands if you make a small raise on the flop and then a small raise on the turn.
My suspicion here is that he had a hand like 9x there when he folded the river. That he had a hand like 9x and that we did end up missing value by not raising the flop and or the turn.
Yeah, I agree. I think that those are mandatory to raise. Because he'll call with all that junk, you know what I mean?
All right, we've
he's got ace king, he'll call a small raise. He's just a bad player.
We backed it up to the 8-minute mark. Which table? Table 2 or 3?
Table 2. We flop 2 pair. I didn't see the pre-flop action, but it checked to us on the flop. We bet 2 pair on the flop, 8 on the turn. We bet the turn again for value, and then it looks like we check back river.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Let's see what happens here. Oh, this guy limps, and I think this is. By the way, I think this is a fine spot to limp behind.
Yo, Mark, does that make sense, by the way, with the aces about why to raise on the flop or the turn?
It does, and I'll explain why I normally would do that. When fish are betting, it tilts me or throws me off because they bet these such weird amounts on these boards where there's like there was 2 queens, 2 clubs, and they bet such weird amounts, and I guess I just need to
get max value. Think about it that way.
Yeah,
like like you have a really strong hand. He has a really wide range. He's really likely to call you with a lot of that range. So just raise it up and get more value from his range. Especially in a spot like that where where the pot's already so huge. Like there's it's not like you can raise it up and like shut him out where he can only continue with Queen X because the pot's already huge. You know what I mean? So it's not like you're not gonna split his range, but by raising it there, just raise it up, get max value from all of his draws and from all of his weak 1 pair hands before the board gets so scary that even the fishy guy can find the fold.
See,
I
was afraid to raise
you don't
it up
have to. You don't have to make like huge raises either. Like if the board, if you're getting thrown off by their bet sizes, like there was like 17 in the pot, and he bet $3. It's not like you have to make a pot size raise and make it like $27 or something. Like there was 17 in the pot. He only had $27 left in his stack. We probably want about like $9 or something like that to go in on the flop. So when he makes it 3, like you can just raise it to 9, even though there's 17 in the pot. That's okay too, because I'm not going to make a big raise. I want him to call with gut shots and like just a random overcard or even ace highs or like pocket 5s or like whatever. I'm not making a big raise. I'm just making a real small one just to make sure that like the right amount of money goes into the pot for that street. So it's not like he bets 3. You have to be like, oh, I need to like bet pot and raise like huge.
Yeah, and you can also think about it this way: if you're having trouble deciding on a raise size in a spot, specifically in a spot like that, like if he had checked, we would have bet maybe $10, right? On the $17 flop, we'd have bet maybe $10. So when he bets 3, just make it 10. Make sure that the amount of money that you wanted to go in goes in.
All right.
Unless and if he bets like I don't want to go into that. Never mind. But yeah, just make sure the amount of money that you want to go in goes in. Don't let him dictate the amount of money that goes in. I mean, you're the experienced poker player.
Yeah,
Mark. The main concept really to keep in mind there is that like if he's got some sort of like draw, you get value from his draws on the flop and the turn when there's still cards to come. And then once the river hits and he doesn't hit his draw, you don't get any more value anymore. So you gotta like juice the value out of those kind of hands before while he's still got a chance in his mind to like make his hand. And then once the river comes, you can't like call with just a busted draw anymore. So that's just the main reason why that we like raise there.
All right, so table 2, fish limped in, and then we isolated on the button. We get called by the big blind and the original limper. 6/7 suited, I think is fine to limp behind. It's one of the very few cases where I think limping's okay. Is limping behind with a hand that doesn't always play super well post flop. When you're going to go multi-way pretty often. I think isolating it's fine if we think there's a reasonable chance we're going to get heads up. So I don't mind your raise, but I think limping is a valid option. Let's take a Mark. You flop bottom 2 pair here. We go 3-handed. It looks like both these guys are fish. What sizing do you think you should be using here?
2/3 pot. So 425, 450.
Yeah, I'd be going on the larger.
Maybe even probably 5.
Yeah.
Maybe even higher.
Yeah.
Because there's tons of draws.
Yeah, there's a lot of draws, and it's kind of nice that we have bottom 2 pair, which means that it's much easier for them to have a jack, which they certainly like. If we bet $6 here, they can't fold. They're not folding 8-9. They're not folding a jack. So I wouldn't quite bet pot, but I definitely would be betting on the large side. It'd certainly be betting larger than 2/3. So I'd probably be in the 5
I may
525
actually
range.
have bet 5 over. I forget how much I bet, but yeah.
About the limping,
But
by the way, I would, if they're deep stacked, I like raising this hand because if I get a monster flop, I want to be able to play a huge pot. But if they're shallow stacked and only have like $10, I like the limp then because that way I can like get like multiple 3 streets of betting. Whereas like raising it doesn't allow for multiple streets of betting with this type of hand versus like a $10 stack. So that's kind of what helps me determine if I want to like raise or over limp against a fish
All right,
with 7-6 specifically.
all right. So on this turn, talk about sizing again. What do you think about sizing on this turn? How big are we gonna bet?
what is the pot? 16?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
12.
but Sean, if I could just jump in, Mark, what do you think his flop check calling range looks like? Like when he check calls the flop, what hands do you put him on?
Two random hearts, 5, 6, possibly Jack 10, Jack 9, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I
Or,
think that's
or possibly 2 overcards if he, I don't, it looks like he never raises. Well, it's only 18 hands, but
Yeah,
so-
he could. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I think you're on the right track. I wouldn't rule out, like you said, Jack. Jack 10, Jack 9. I would not with these fish. I would not be ruling out hands like Ace Jack. To be honest, you can't even really rule out queens through aces, although they're certainly less likely. But I wouldn't be ruling out hands like Ace Jack, Queen Jack, King Jack.
yeah.
So he can have he can have a lot of jacks. He can have a lot of straight draws like 8-9, 8-5, 4-5. He can have a lot of flush draws. Basically, any two suited cards. These type of guys are going to play. And so like when he check calls the flop, his range is super wide, contains a lot of draws. So I guess the question then becomes, is this 8 a good or a bad card for us?
Well, it's not a good card.
It is a good card.
It
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Because if he has Jack 10, he didn't hit. If he has Jack 9, he has nothing.
It's not only that, but a lot of his cards now pick up something else. Like a lot of his flop calling range now just got added to in some sense. So like if he had 8-9 or 8-5, now he has a pair to go with it. Right now he's definitely not fully in turn. If he had Jack 10, now he has a gut shot to go with his Jack. If he had a heart draw, with a 9 or a 10. Or an 8 in it, he's certainly not folding, right? So when we beat all those hands, he
Right.
just picked up, some added incentive to call a really big bet on the turn with this 8. While this 8, if he were to check raise here, it wouldn't be the we wouldn't be the happiest people ever. But it certainly, it helps his range, but it helps his range in a way that doesn't make him beat us very often. So he just picks up some added incentive to just call like a really, really big bet here. So if I was going to bet here, I mean, I probably would never go under like $13. I'd probably go 13, 13.50.
Okay, I believe I bet around 12 or something like that. We'll have to, I don't know.
You have anything to add to that, Dan?
Yeah, no, I think that all sounds about right. His flop check calling range could be, first of all, it could be any jack. It could be Jack Deuce.
Right.
Like he's a
Yeah,
huge fish. I mean, it could
yeah.
be any jack, any 6, any 7, pocket 8s through pocket 10s, random overcards, any flush draw, any gut shot. So it's quite wide, and I agree with what we said about the 8 improving a lot of his range. So yeah, I would just bomb it on the turn and expect him to call again with flush draws, Jack X, and pair plus gutters, or pair plus open-ender type hands.
Oh, and what do we bet here? Looks like we bet 950. Yeah, wait, we're missing.
Yeah, so like
a
we
lot
said,
of
that's
value here.
definitely on the small side.
Yeah.
He's a huge
Okay.
fish. You know what I mean? Like the thing about these fish is like the thing that makes them fish is that they can't fold, right? So the fact that they can't fold is why they're like a weak, bad player. So we just bet big and take advantage of the fact that they don't have a fold button and just get more value. Just take another $3 off him because he's just going to call anyways.
Yep. Exactly. And then on this river, I guess based on what you said earlier, Dan, that we decided to check back. And I mean, it's clearly a value bet on the river. He can certainly have hands like Ace X of hearts. He can have like a jack is still pretty likely to call us on the river. We're going to lose the hands like 8-9 most of the time. A 5-6 he's not going to call with most of the time. but there's still, like, we definitely can't be checking here. We have 2 pair, and he's really likely to call us with a lot of his 1 pair type hands. And another thing about our bet sizing on the turn, again, it's really, really hard to see stacks, but if we had bet, a larger size on the turn, probably, I guess we'd have bet $4 more here, $4 or $5 more here, so it'd be an extra 10, there'd be 45 in the pot, so we could be jamming the river for value. Although a smaller bet size on this particular river might be better, we might want to do some type of milking bet to make sure he calls us with a jack, but we certainly want to be setting ourselves up for the possibility of shoving the river when we have 2 pair versus a fish.
Yeah, as played, I agree with that. The turn bet doesn't just get more value on the turn, it makes the pot bigger, so we get more value on the river, so that's very important. And as played on the river, I'd bet small. I'd probably bet like less than half pot. I'd bet, $15, about that, just because I want to get the ace is kind of a bad card for us. It's good because if he has the nut flush draw, he's obviously calling, but it's bad because he could have ace-6, ace-7, ace-8, some crap like that, or he could. It just mainly makes it a little scarier for the times that he has like Jack-10, Jack-Queen. You might not want to call all in, so I just bet like $15.
Yeah, I probably would not jam. I think I'd probably go slightly larger than that. I think I would stay under 20, but I'd probably be larger than 15, but not a huge difference. We'd be about the same. Yeah, just
because I want to get called by a jack.
Yeah,
maybe 8-9 makes some sort of bad call.
And so, I mean, you can see here he ended up having Queen 2, so he wasn't calling a river bet with that particular hand, but when he has Ace 2, he's calling a river bet. And certainly with his Queen 2 of hearts, he was certainly calling a larger turn bet.
Right. Yeah, see, there's been a lot of hands like that where I bet flop, bet turn, and then the river hits and they check, and I bet it, and then they shove on me. And
I mean, we can talk about that too. I mean, so if we'd have bet $15,
it's just like selective memory, and I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna play. It was the ace. I was like, I'm gonna play this safe and check it back.
You can't be afraid there. In one, when you're value betting the river, you have to make sure that there is in fact a worse range that can call you, and in that case, there absolutely is. He certainly can call you with like the Ace X of hearts. He certainly can call with any Jack X. And just for what it's worth, if we had bet like $15 there and he jammed on the river, we'd probably fold. It would be a really gross fold because pot odds, but he's just literally never jamming anything worse.
Yeah, it sucks when you get check jammed on the river, man. But the fact is that like we make so much money on the river. The thing that separates like the small winners from the big winners are the guys that can put in those like nice value bets on the river because the pot is so big. So getting an extra $15 or $20 on the river, that's like a huge difference in your win rate. You know what I mean? If I make $15 more on that hand than you make, like my win rate is going to be like so much higher than yours as a result. So it's like that's really where so much of our money is. Like
and think about,
an extra little bit.
Think about how many times you get in river spots like that. Like you're going to get that. You're going to get a river spot like that once a session at least, right?
At least.
So now you're talking like every.
Sessions have been.
So you're talking every single, like every single session. Somebody who's playing that river correctly is getting an extra $15. And that adds up very quickly. I mean, if someone offered you a way to make an extra $15 every single day just by clicking one button, you'd take it.
So as usual, I don't know how long we've been recorded, Sean. We've probably been going like half an hour. I think we made it through 5 minutes of footage or something.
Yeah. It was pretty funny. We're gonna have to break it into multiple parts. That's for sure. We'll see what happens here. Maybe go another. I guess maybe another 10 minutes on the recording, and then take a break.
I think these queens down here at table 4.
Okay, let's see what happens here.
I raised.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I raised 250 here. I remember last hand we reviewed, and I was in the small blind with a limper, and only made it $2 last time. And then Dan was saying he likes a bigger bet.
Yeah,
there, so
and he's definitely correct. You want to make it 5x is kind of like your standard out of position, and then you can go even bigger. If depending on how big the fish is, I mean, just make it 6x. I mean, if he's he's a really big fish, make it 7x. You know, push it as far as they'll let you take it. When you're value raising, just get as much value as you can.
But yeah, given this particular guy, given his short stack, and we only have 3 hands, 250 is the perfect size.
I agree. Yeah. And then we snap call with the nuts and ship it.
So yeah, that hand is pretty self-explanatory. Not really much to say there.
Yeah.
I see we have Queen Jack on table 1. I assume we were the pre-flop aggressor.
Correct.
Either way, I'm betting this flop, whether whether he checked to me or
right. Yeah, especially with a fish. Yeah, just betting, like, this is a value bet with Queen Jack. I think some people, especially in the micros, feel like they can't value bet here. But and there may be some tags that maybe you can't value bet here. But sometimes even just betting is better because it just wins the pot, and sometimes it takes you out of tricky spots. But certainly versus a fish, a 60-20 VPIP fish, he's check calling here with a ton of hands, 9-10, ace-10, worst queens, any flush draw, pocket sevens, all sorts of stuff. We'll check call this flop. And I think our plan should be to go ahead and barrel the turn again for value, and then check back most rivers.
Yeah, I would tend to agree.
And we can
a lot of tags are tempted to check back this turn. They're like, yeah. See, we check back. It's like what Sean said. We're betting because he'll call with worse queens. He'll call with any straight draw and any flush draw. And we don't just want to let him have a free card. So not only does it protect our hand, it also just gets value from all those hands. And then we can just check back the river if we want to. If he gets a king, he's getting 2 streets from us, like no matter what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if we bet the flop and then check back the turn and then he half pots the river, I mean, we're probably going to call with his hand if draws miss. So he's getting those 2 streets anyway. We might as well force him, just like in that other hand with the aces when we wanted to make that raise on the flop. Force him to pay with all of his drawing hands on the turn. Like if you're going to put in 2 streets, you decide when the 2 streets go in. Whoa.
Gosh.
Yeah, and we check back the river here. Yeah, if we decide to check back the turn, not value betting 2 pair versus a 60-20 is.
That's crazy,
yeah.
man. You gotta bet that.
I didn't even know what to say. I was speechless.
Because first of all, if he had the flush, usually he just bets out with the flush. Right? So even if you had like a hand like King Deuce or Ace Queen, I would still value bet because I just don't think he's ever really got a flush. Because I think if he had a flush, he would probably bet out. And if you do bet and he check raises, it's like, oh well, he's obviously got the flush. You just snap fold. It's no big deal. But on this board, he'll call you with any king. He'll probably call with any queen because you check back the turn. Maybe he'll even just call with a jack.
Yeah,
ace
jack, jack 10, jack 9.
Yeah, who knows? He's a bad player, so like our hand is almost always good, and he's a bad poker player. Just give him a chance to be bad.
Yep. Yeah. So we're discovering a leak of yours, Mark, and I know we've done some hand history reviews, but we actually haven't. And this is one of the reasons that video reviews are so good, is because and sometimes in hand history reviews, I don't get to see this river spot ever, and there's 2, the 6-7 and this Queen Jack. 2 clear spots where, it was clearly a value bet when you look at their range and the types of hands that they'll be able to call you with. Missing that value it's going to add up a lot over time. I think your fold here is fine, by the way, with the 8 deuce. The board's kind of dry, you're stuck in the middle. Your hand can't take much pressure. We don't know what this guy's going to do on the turn. I think folding the 8 deuce is fine. All right, let's talk about this hand, this King Jack, Dan, on the bottom right. We raise pre-flop, short stack player flats. We c-bet the flop, and then Shorty has less than a pot size bet left.
Yeah, this is really close. I couldn't tell how much he had on the flop. I was wondering, I was trying to figure out, discern from... Yeah. Sorry to everyone watching this video, by the way, if anyone sees this. The stack sizes are hard to read, so that makes it a little tricky. But, obviously we value town ourselves against an ace. But if he's got a jack or a flush draw, we're value betting.
Yeah.
So, it's just trying to like weigh his ace X combos versus flush and jack X combos. And it's really close because
do think
fish
it's very
love
close.
ace X.
Yeah.
Like a normal player is not going to just play like ace 6 offsuit there. You know what I mean? Like, but the fish love the ace X hand. So
I think the
he
way
has to have a fair amount of ace.
I think the way I look at this spot, especially, and luckily he has a stack size that's much easier to deal with. If he had like $12 into the 750, the turn spot's actually much trickier. But when he has less than a pot size bet here, I look at it kind of this way. My hand's pretty good. He definitely can call me with worse, and he's more likely to make a turn mistake than I am. And if I check the turn and he bets the river, I'm really likely to make a mistake there, either by calling with the worst hand or by folding the best hand. So I'd rather just click the pot button, chip it in on the turn, and kind of be done with the hand, because it's relatively close, and he certainly can't call with worse.
Yeah, given that he's just got so little money, I don't mind just betting it.
But yeah, it's it's not we're not fist pumping. I'd probably end up shipping the river, I guess, when he checks. Yeah, and he had Jack 8 there. We would have stacked Jack 8 on the turn, but again, that doesn't, that's being results oriented. He definitely could have had, an ace there.
Did we check back river?
Yes.
Yeah, Mark, that's another spot where, again, just like another river value bet would be good. Because now that once you check back the turn, if he had an ace, he would probably bet out the ace on the river himself. So once he doesn't bet out on the river, he probably doesn't have an ace. So, it's probably safe to just go ahead and try to like get a couple more bucks off him.
I like your lead here. This is a limp pot with the 7-4, top pair, open ender, backdoor diamonds. I probably would just bet $1.50 instead of $1.
I just pot it. It's such a small pot. I mean, it's only $2 in there.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna keep betting. Let me turn the bottom into a straight with a flush draw, a straight flush draw. Oh yeah, how can you not bet? And we do bet, and your sizing looks okay. And
well,
so
6
close.
diamonds.
I know,
Yeah,
so
jack pot.
close, so close. Yeah, I actually, your bet size here on the river. Let's talk about the merits of the size. I think I just click the pot button. If I'd either go really big, like full pot, or I'd go really small. Because if I'm going this in between size doesn't accomplish very much. If you're going really big, you're targeting hands like 9x and 4x that we don't think that this fishy guy can fold for any size. And if we go really small, then we're targeting some type of like one pair hand that just can't that he just can't find the fold. But when you go this in between size, you're either forcing out a hand like ace 8. Let's just pick a hand that he might call a small bet with. We're either forcing out ace 8 while losing value from 9x because they're not going to raise it, or does that make sense? We're either forcing out the bottom end of his range while not getting max value. Yeah, I kind of lost.
What do you think about check raise, Sean?
Ooh, that's actually really good too. Yeah, it didn't cross my mind. I was just thinking, just click the pot button. But
the only thing is, I think like if we pot it, because I agree that like he probably can't call us. I mean, the one guy's only got $1 or something.
We don't care about
quite make it out, but it looks like $1.
It's $1.79.
This guy looks like he's got like a lot. So, to me, like the only way that we get a bunch of this guy's money is if he's got a 9. And if he's got a 9, he'll definitely bet it if we check, and then like we'll probably just be too weak to like fold to a check raise.
Yeah,
but he's
and
not
I think
going to be able
if
to,
we
like,
check raise,
it
we should just check shove. Like even if this guy bets like $3, I think we should just ship it in on him.
Yeah, because he'll just call with a 9 because he's like can't fold a straight.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the problem is that if he's got a 4, because he's kind of fishy, he probably will just check his 4.
Yeah, that
and
is.
Yeah, I didn't think anyone would bet unless I did it.
Yeah, so we miss a bet against his 4x,
but
I
stack
think
his
we make
9x.
like double against his 9x.
Yeah, I think, and we do have a four blocker here.
Right.
Mark, it was interesting. You said you didn't think anyone would bet unless you did, And if that's your thinking, that means that you think that they have very weak ranges, and in that case, your bet size is bad. Because if that's the range you're targeting, and now I think what Dan says, I actually like check raise the best of all. Now that Dan mentioned it, but if your thinking in this hand was that they're not going to bet, that means you don't think that they have a straight, right? You don't think it's very likely they have a straight. You think that they have weak ranges. So your bet size is not good for targeting that range at all. You need to bet something very small to get a call from a one pair type hand. And this bet size does not accomplish that. This forces out hands like 8x or 7x.
Yeah, because here's the thing: you bet like $5 or $6, he'll call with like Ace-7 or 5-6, you know, hands like that, and you get like $5 off all those hands. Whereas if you pot it or go for a check raise, you don't make anything off those hands. So you can either try to get the $5 off a bunch of different hands like that, or you can go for the gold for the time that he has a 9 and go for the check raise and try to get his whole stack. So I'd do one or the other. I'd either bet like pretty small and just try to get paid by like one pair or two pair, or just kind of hope he's got the 9 and check and let him bet and then jam on him and like, you know. So to me, I think that the times that he has a 9 and I get the whole stack might outweigh the times that somebody's got two pair and I win the $5 off them. But you know, it's annoying because the check raise only is going to work once in a while. You got to understand that, like, you know, usually this is just going to check through and you feel bad, but the time that it works, you make so much more.
Yeah, and it's definitely worth mentioning that, like, you understand why, like, you kind of got to go with one or the other. It doesn't make sense to pick that kind of in between bet size. You just
because they're gonna be folding anyways.
Right.
And,
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you got to go with one or the other. You know, go for the top of the range or the bottom of the range. And versus the bottom of the range, we need a really small bet. And versus the top of the range, you need to go like full pot or the check raise. And yeah. All right. I actually think we've been recording, I guess, 45, 50 minutes now. So I think it's a good time to go ahead and take a break.
All right. Yeah, we'll wrap up here, Mark. Just to summarize from this session, I think that the main thing. And this really applies to any situation in poker, but it sounds like kind of an oversimplification, but especially on like these river spots, just kind of ask yourself, what do I think that he has? And then you can like target your bet sizing accordingly. Because what ends up happening, and this happens to a lot of my students, is that some river card comes off, like the ace on that, when you had bottom two pair, or medium two pair. Like what ends up happening is the ace hits. And, like, just our initial reaction is like, oh, crap, the ace hits. This stinks, check. You know? And that's kind of like all that goes through our heads is we're just like, that stinks. I hit check. And we're kind of thinking about other tables, and we're not really, like, thinking much more deeply about it than that. And that ends up costing us money. Because if we're thinking on each street, like, well, what's he calling me with? And if we're kind of thinking about that every time, and like, oh, well, he's probably calling me with some draws, some top pairs. All right, all the draws missed, but you can still probably call with all his top pairs. So, you know, therefore I'll bet like half pot on the river and hope that he calls even though the ace hits. And, you know, it doesn't, it all, just that brief sentence I just said is like, really, that's kind of like all I think about it at the table. It's not like I enumerate every single possible hand combination in my head when I'm multi-tabling. It's just like, you know, generally think about what am I trying to get called by? Well, he can probably call with a jack, so, you know, I'll bet like half pot and see if he calls with a jack. And that's really the main thing I would say to you is on the river in these spots, don't just think about like what your hand is and if the board is crappy or not. You got to be thinking about like, always got to be thinking about what's he got, you know, what's going to call me and how much is he going to call with what he's got. And that'll allow you to like make a lot more effective value bets on the river.
I gotta say though, I do try to do that, but with these fish, and especially these Italian players that are on Everleaf, I can never ever really. I mean, I have such a hard time because they can have any two cards at any time, really.
Yeah, I think
players.
We've talked a little bit about that, and I think, and I mean, if you listen to when you, me, and Dan were talking about several of these hands, I mean, we pretty much, you know, most of the time we got a showdown, we pretty much nailed it, right? They were always right about where we thought they were,
right.
And I feel like sometimes, like sometimes you see them show up with just a completely weird, wacky hand that doesn't make any sense, right? And like you're like, man, I never ever would have thought he could have called the turn with, called the flop and the turn with absolutely no equity, and then like donk the river, right? It just with total air. And you see that like one time, or you see that twice in 20,000 hands. And all of a sudden, this sticks out in your head a lot, and now you feel like, well, I just can't ever do range analysis on these guys because they can have anything, and that's not really true. You're talking about the extreme outliers, not what you run into most of the time. And that's what matters. I mean, like, yeah, sure, every once in a while these guys are going to have something crazy and play a hand just completely out of nowhere. But that's, for the most part, even fish, like when they call a flop, when they call a turn, like you can narrow down the range pretty far. And with fish, you can't really give it, like you're not going to enumerate combos like Dan said. Like you can't do that, but you can certainly be like, man, he's going to have a lot of draws here. He's going to have a lot of top pairs and some middle pairs. And by the time he calls the turn, like maybe he folds most of the middle pairs, but he'll sometimes have middle pair and definitely have all of those same top pairs and draws. And you just kind of like give them a rough outline of a range. You don't have to know like, oh, he can have queen jack offsuit and queen jack suited, but not jack 10 suited because he'd fold that at some point. You just a rough outline. And I think you'd be surprised at how close you can get to nailing people's hands sometimes. And as you get better at it, sometimes you'll value bet a river, and you'll pick a very specific size. You're like, man, I want this guy to be able to call me with a hand like 6-7, so you bet like 1/3 pot, and then they call you 6-7, and you feel like a genius, right? But you're not a genius. You just went through the logical steps, and I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you learn to pick up that skill.
Yeah, and one last thing on that, Mark, in terms about them being spazzy, there's usually two different types of like 60 VPIP players. There's the 60 VPIP loose passive calling station, and then there's the 60 VPIP like spaz bluffer guy. And like this guy, for example, that we were against, next to the dealer on table 2 was he seemed pretty loose passive. Yeah. So like if he check raises the river on you ever, he's just got the nuts because he's the loose passive type. So like you can just bet the river and comfortably fold anytime he like check raises the river. But if your read is that the guy's like a spaz bluffer, well then you just bet call because he's got like lots of spaz bluffs in his range. You know, so you just kind of like treat him. If he's a loose passive station, you just value bet, and if he raises, you fold. And if he's a spaz bluffer, you still just value bet. But then if he raises, you just probably call because he's a spaz bluffer. So as long as you kind of have a sense of who you're against, it's okay even if their ranges are unpredictable because you kind of are going to know like how to react anyways.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break there, and we will watch some more of this video next time. See you around, guys.
All right. See you.